Let me just make sure I've got my proper headphones on. I am taking calls. 508-928-5255 is the phone number. We take calls here and also chats if you'd like to go to the Rumble page. We're live on Rumble and we're live on Rockfin. So you're welcome to join us as well on Rockfin. I want to talk about, obviously, the ongoing story of the war against the state of Israel. Without basically the news as we have it now, before I begin a brief analysis here, is that the Israeli government has said that they have cut off supplies to Gaza. That means electricity, food, medicine, deliveries, and that they are blockading Gaza in advance of what appears to be a military incursion. They are lining up tanks. There's film of this along the border. There's I think at least a partial, if not a full, mobilization of troops. Israel has assured the world, at least the IDF spokesman, that they are fully armed in terms of ammunition, and I certainly have no reason to doubt that. They're also mobilizing in the north to prevent any incursion by Hezbollah, which is another genuine problem. And they are organizing the more domestic elements of their police apparatus to deal with any sort of unrest that may occur, not only in Judea and Samaria, but in northern Israel. And they seem to be battening everything down and getting ready for the long and painful and difficult road ahead, which is to once again secure the country and pacify the country against those who seek to annihilate the Jews. This is a genocidal situation, as we have just seen, and I want to address that aspect of this. First of all, this is not new to Israel. This is something that goes back really to the latter part of the 19th century, when there was an increase of immigration of Jews into what was then known as South Syria, and that the response, besides general, kind of ignoring the new immigrants who were setting up communities and farms and villages, was an occasional massacre. And the nature of the massacre had similarities, if not was very much like the kind of massacre that just occurred when terrorists flying hang gliders entered into a peace concert. And I'm going to get to that. And started murdering people and kidnapping people and raping and molesting dead bodies and all of the rest. It was the same sort of thing. It was a level of hate and depravity that, quite frankly, we are not used to seeing in Western countries. And I don't think that it was common to Arab and Islamic countries either up until that point, although this certainly did go on with the Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, as I mentioned yesterday. And I think that I got into yesterday a little bit about the the psychological mindset of this and the cult of the assassins, and some of the conditioning that went into the Armenian genocide, and you can study that. And obviously, it's not unique to Arabs and Muslims. This is something that's happened around the world in different settings from time to time. But there does seem to be a particular ferocity in terms of trying to annihilate the Jews, trying to destroy the Jewish person, the Jewish body, if you will. This level of hatred is not normal. This isn't a normal war. This is an annihilative war. It's not military units fighting in the field, which, by the way, was very much what the Yom Kippur War was. This is why this is worse in a way. This is really an attack on the people of Israel, men, women, children, Holocaust survivors. And it's not something that's new, as I said. It goes back to the very early period when there was an increase in Jewish immigration to South Syria, and it continued on right up through other various massacres. This happens in Israel. This is what Israel has to live with. This is the tension that they have to deal with. These are the realities, unfortunately. These are the cards that Israel has been dealt. And I think it's been shown from experience, starting in the very beginning, right up through the War of Independence and in every other war, that unfortunately Israel has had to fight, that the solution for the Israelis in terms of preserving their society and protecting their people is always a position of extreme strength. Anything less than that, any sign of weakness results in murder, massacre, mayhem, as we have seen. And so I think that Israel has to press their case. The traditional nature of the Israeli response is that for every Jew who is murdered, they will strike back and find the people, and no matter how long it takes, and they will suffer the exact same consequence. I suppose that technically it goes back to the biblical formula, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That is the sort of power that preserves Israel. That is their moral right as a sovereign nation to protect the lives and the health and the welfare of their citizens. That is the appropriate response. That is the only response that works in the situation that Israel is in. You know, we in the United States can be very somnambulant about the nuances of justice and due process, because we don't have that kind of genocidal threat banging away at our back door, threatening to break in at any moment into our homes so that they can not only murder us and our children and our families and our elderly and our women and our men, but mutilate the bodies, rape them, rip them apart, engage in the kind of unspeakable atrocity that, weirdly enough, actually goes back to the days of idol worship, the days of Amalek. Now, I'm going to give out the number again here. You're welcome to call. Anyone who would like to join me to discuss these issues, you're welcome to do it. Please observe basic community standards. That's all I ask. The number is 508-928-5255. You're welcome to join the program. 508-928-5255. This is Charles Moscowitz. I am the author of several books that touch upon these themes, themes of Israel, themes of Judaism, themes of ethics and moral values that I would contend emanate from the Torah for all of mankind. And books of politics. I just wrote a book about the Biden regime and it's what I would argue is its illegitimacy. So let me get back to the subject at hand here. We will note that the um, the terrorists attacked Israel's what Winston Churchill during World War II called the weak underbelly. That's why he wanted to attack the Nazis through the Balkans. He viewed that as the weak underbelly. Um, and the weak underbelly with regard to Israel was this concert that was being held on the border or near the border of Gaza with peace activists, basically. This rave, young people, people that we all know. There are just like our own sons and daughters going out to hear music and having a good time. They were not obviously armed, which they should have been. We'll get into that. They didn't make the right judgment in terms of doing this on the border of Gaza. Probably not a great idea. Might have been a better venue to do it in Tel Aviv or maybe somewhere in the Negev away from the border. So they were like sitting ducks. The decision was made by the terrorists in coordination with the Iranians, apparently, to launch this invasion, to kidnap people alive, including babies, and bring them back to Gaza, both as prisoner exchange, but also to try to use them as a buffer to ensure that Israel did not retaliate by invading Gaza, because they know that Israel is concerned about hostages. That every Jewish life in Israel has deep value and that it's a very disruptive thing in Israel, especially if the government seems to be in any way disregarding the life of one of their citizens. They know this, and they took advantage of it. It's the same way that Arafat, back in the days of the PLO, used to fight Israel by hiding his tanks or hiding his missile launchers and big guns in nursery schools and in hospitals and in nursing homes and in places where you have the most vulnerable, because they know that they can take advantage. Well, it serves two purposes. First of all, they know that Israel maintain, even though they have every moral right to do whatever is necessary, they maintain a bit of a higher standard in terms of the way they strike the enemy. They don't want to strike innocent people, both for moral reasons, but also for practical reasons, because if you do that, you're going to create more enemies. You're going to create more anger. You're going to stir up more trouble in the future. The Israelis understand that, so they try to avoid fighting that way. They try to get the enemy who is killing them and who is a legitimate military target isolated away from innocent people so they can stop them where they should be stopped. So the strategy, from what I understand, regarding the hostage taking is both the exchange of prisoners, but also to give them this buffer. And that's why they're sending out pictures of beautiful young Israeli girls and women and babies in cages as a way to let the Israeli society know. It's propaganda. It's true, they have them. But it's a way to remind the society that if they want these people alive, they had better not go in heavy-handed and do this job. They had better sit back and then negotiate, which of course leaves Israel in a position of weakness, but it also adheres to Israel's general moral and ethical standards in terms of the rules of engagement around war. So they have Israel, in a sense, by the short and curlies, as the old saying goes. By the way, the number, if you'd like to join the program, we are live, 508 928 5255. 508 928 5255. We are taking calls here. Charles Moscowitz, you're welcome to join the show. Israel has, as I mentioned, I wanted to talk about the mindset of the young people the innocent people who are attending this concert, and in a sense, the so-called peace movement. I don't think that they're dealing with reality. I think they mean well. I hope and I pray that they are not in any way harmed or molested, but they're operating in a sort of a dream. They're not awake in a sense to realities, which is ultimately that in order to maintain individual safety and individual freedom, you have to take steps to protect yourself and to assert your sovereignty as an individual. Now that the level of that can vary depending upon the circumstances in which you live. My circumstance personally here in the United States, here in Boston, is a little less severe, is a little different. We have a peaceful tradition here. We haven't had, terrorists come in and killing people on the streets and kidnapping people, at least not yet. And so my level of preparedness, my level of vigilance might be proportionate to the threat and thus a little bit less than if I lived in the state of Israel generally, or more specifically, if I lived on the border of Gaza or Lebanon, where I would argue, it seems to me, that if some of these young people, preferably if all of them, had weapons, had even a handgun, this wouldn't have happened. It's just that simple. They could have shot these people immediately. That was the only thing that could stop them. They didn't. They were there with I saw pictures of them. They're there with, they look like teenagers look here on the beach. I mean, wearing halter tops and leggings and caftans and, kind of hippie beads. They were not prepared. They were not dealing with reality. They were not focusing, oh, we want peace. Great. Would you do a peace rally on the borders of Poland when Nazi Germany was invading? I mean, it's not dealing with, it's not rational. And I think that in a sense, we can say, oh, it's sad, it's terrible that we have to do this. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The fact of the matter is that it is a reality. Just like I take precautions in my own home by locking my door at night, or even if I go in the house, I put on a lock. I lock the door of my car. I look around when I'm walking on the street, even in the most safest neighborhood in terms of crime, because I am dealing with the realities of my own environment. The realities in Israel are much more serious. And so the Israelis have to be vigilant in that way. And I think that given the circumstance of Gaza, and as I mentioned before, I mentioned this yesterday, Gaza was not occupied by Israel. Gaza was handed over to the Palestinian Authority by Ariel Sharon on a silver platter. They were given funds. They were given training. The Israelis that lived there were stripped away. They were Judenrein. They were ethnically cleansed. We're talking, I don't know about how many people, maybe about 10,000 people. These were people who lost their businesses. They either abandoned their businesses or they dismantled them, or in some cases they handed them over to Palestinian Arabs. The Palestinian Arabs of Gaza were given the opportunity to create a prosperous sovereign state. As I said yesterday, this was beachfront property on the Mediterranean with beautiful sandy beaches. They could have created an enclave that might have been comparable to the French Riviera. They could have created another Singapore. They had all of those opportunities going for them. Money was pouring in from all around the world, including the United States. Israel was helping. They were helping their police develop basic infrastructure and their administration develop basic governing institutions. But it didn't happen because radicals were allowed to overthrow that government. The radicals, the Hamas, I think they killed something like 200 Palestinian Authority people, and they launched a war, an aggressive war against the state of Israel with thousands of missiles and terror tunnels and other techniques, floating in gas balloons which would blow up over the Israeli farms. Now they had the hang gliders. I don't know what they're going to come up with next. But the point is that they turned Gaza into that kind of an attack vehicle, and thus Israel must get rid of Gaza as a sovereign entity at this point. I don't know if they have the will to do it. I know that they're bombing the military sites. The other question, of course, the broader question is, how the hell did Gaza get these kinds of advanced weapons past the Israelis? What were they doing? I mean, were they asleep? What was happening with Israeli intelligence? We hear so much about the Mossad, and the anti-Semites say, "Oh, the Mossad is behind everything, and they're taking over the world, and they're involved with all kinds of anything bad happening. The Mossad is there." Well, fine. Where were they now? I mean, their most basic job was to protect Israel, to protect the homeland. Obviously, they were not so powerful, unfortunately. Either way, Israel is going to have to, I believe, and it's easy for me to say this sitting here in my comfortable home in Boston. I'm going to say it anyway. They have to go in with military force, and they have to dismantle Gaza as an independent entity. It's that simple. They have to take out anyone who is involved in military action against Israel. They should be deported, I don't know to where, or they should be imprisoned, hopefully deported, maybe given the opportunity to leave. And the rest of the Gaza population, we're talking, I don't know, about 1.5, 1.7 million people, if they're willing to be peaceful, then they should be, in a situation where perhaps it's put under the authority of the Palestinian Authority of Judea and Samaria, of the West Bank, and just basically pacified. Israel is going to have to maintain military presence there. They can't just turn back and go away like they've done, because it'll just happen again, unfortunately. Look, I think that most Palestinian Arabs living in Gaza probably would like to live peaceably alongside Israel. Apparently, the Israelis in recent months had loosened some of the border restrictions, and they had allowed Gazans to come into Israel to have a job and to work in Israel. That should continue, and but it's not going to happen until they get rid of this terror structure. And that's going to be very difficult and very dangerous, particularly for the Israelis. They don't have any choice. They're going to have to do it. Gaza is going to have to be completely pacified before anything else can happen. There has to be a means to ensure that Gaza never again threatens the state of Israel. They will not have sovereignty. Israel can make the case that they must not, given the fact that they had been given such opportunity, and they had basically not only squandered it, but they had turned it into an aggressive terror state. So, the rest of the world, if they don't like it, tough. Israel doesn't have to explain its right to protect the life and the livelihoods and the properties of its own people. That's why sovereign nations exist. That's why any sovereign nation exists. So, on that note, I think I said what I felt like saying right now. I'm going to give out the number one more time if you'd like to join me. That being 508 928 5255. 508 928 5255. I intend to do podcasting like this periodically each day. I can't commit to a time. I should, but it might make it more easier to build some consistency here. But the podcast, of course, is live on Rumble, Rockfin, Facebook, uh, LinkedIn, Twitter X, and several other sites. So check it out. Please feel free to check out my books. They're available at Amazon Books, including titles that deal with Jewish and Israeli issues. Just put my name in the server, Charles Moscowitz, and they will come up. So, thank you for joining me, everyone. God bless you all. God bless America. God bless Israel. Let's hope and pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Thank you.